Guys, today's update is one of the most unusual, unexpected, and honestly confusing turns we've seen in the entire Whittaker story. And that's saying something because this situation has already been full of twists, surprises, and people jumping in and out of the picture with their own motives, their own agendas, and their own versions of the truth. But now, for the first time, we're seeing something different. We're seeing the Whittakers in a way the internet hasn't seen before. And the person at the center of this shift, whether you like him, distrust him, or feel completely conflicted about him, is Brian Kody. Yes, that Brian. And whether people want to admit it or not, the last few days have been some of the biggest moments he's ever had. Not because of drama, not because of clout-chasing allegations, and not because he inserted himself into the Whittaker story the way critics claim. No, this time, something else happened. And it started to change how people view him. Before we get into the major reactions, the surprising footage, and the emotional moments that honestly caught people off guard, let's rewind just a bit. Because nothing about this recent update makes sense unless you understand the place Brian was standing in before this big moment happened. A few months ago, Brian was being called every name in the book. People said he was manipulative. People said he showed up at the Whittakers solely to make a quick buck. People said he was exploiting the situation the same way others had been accused of doing. And when he made that video asking viewers to donate $1, just $1, people lost it. The comment sections were on fire. Folks were saying he had no right to ask for money. Others said he was using poverty to fund his own expenses. Some even made comparisons to Eric. It got so heated that people stopped even talking about the Whittakers. The entire conversation shifted to Brian, his motives, his personality, his history, his family connections, everything. In fact, it got so loud that many people assumed Brian would disappear from the story completely. They thought he'd back off, stop filming, go silent, or maybe post a vague "I'm done" message. But instead, he did something nobody predicted. He stayed. Not only did he stay, he started filming again. And this time, the footage wasn't of chaos, tension, or questionable behavior. It wasn't about the drama between creators. It wasn't about money, contracts, or court talk. It wasn't about showing off or defending himself. No, the videos he dropped recently were different. They were calm. They were respectful. They were focused. And most importantly, they showed the Whittakers in a way that wasn't sensationalized. It wasn't "look at this shocking thing." It wasn't "look at how strange this situation is." It wasn't about creating a spectacle for views. It was just human. And that, believe it or not, is what sparked everything that followed. Because in the newest footage Brian posted, the Whittakers are not confused or overwhelmed or uncomfortable the way they sometimes appear when new people show up with cameras. Instead, they seem relaxed. They seem open. They seem genuinely willing to engage with him. Almost like they feel safe around him, or at least familiar. That's what shocked people first. You can hear it in the comment sections. People weren't arguing about motives or money this time. Instead, they were saying things like, "He actually talks to them like normal people. Brian seems calmer lately. Betty looks more comfortable with him than with others who filmed them. Ray smiled more in this video than I've seen in months." And whether you support Brian or think he's made mistakes, you cannot deny this. The Whittakers responded differently to him than they did to almost anyone else. And that's what leads us into the first major moment, the one people are calling the soft shift. In one of the most surprising scenes, Brian was standing outside talking to Betty, and she was actually engaging with him, answering him clearly, and even laughing at one point. Betty doesn't laugh for just anyone. She's very selective in how she responds. If she doesn't want to speak, she won't. If she doesn't want to deal with a person, she'll walk away or shut down. But with Brian, she didn't. And when Ray came around during the filming, he didn't seem startled or irritated. Instead, he stayed within the conversation. He even responded when Brian spoke directly to him. This may not sound huge to someone who doesn't follow the Whittakers closely, but for those who do, you know how rare that is. Interactions with them require patience, sensitivity, and trust. And trust isn't something they give out easily. Not after the chaos they've dealt with recently. Not after APS got involved. Not after creators fought online about them. Not after money disputes, contract claims, and accusations from every direction. So when people saw the Whittakers respond to Brian with calmness, not fear, not confusion, just genuine human conversation, it shocked viewers. And it made folks reconsider something that's been debated for months. Does Brian actually care about this family? People still have mixed opinions. But these latest moments forced the internet to slow down and watch closely. Because it wasn't just Betty and Ray Ray. It was Timmy too. And this is the moment that really pushed the conversation into a new direction. In the footage, Timmy walked up to the camera area, not hesitant or distressed, but curious and cheerful. And when Brian greeted him, Timmy responded openly. He didn't turn away. He didn't hide. He didn't freeze up. Instead, he interacted, smiled, and even let Brian direct him gently to where he needed to stand. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel uncomfortable. It didn't feel like someone was using him for content. It felt like a normal human exchange. And that's when viewers started saying something I haven't seen in months. Brian might actually be good for them. And that's where everything shifted. Because right after that moment, and I mean immediately after, Brian launched into a completely different tone than what he's been known for. He talked calmly. He didn't rant. He didn't insult anyone. He didn't throw shade at other creators. He didn't mention YouTube money. He didn't complain about trolls or critics. Instead, he talked about responsibility, about transparency, about how he wants to do better and show people who he really... The Whittakers themselves responded positively. And that doesn't happen unless a person is showing real respect. A person can say whatever they want online, but the Whittakers don't respond to manipulation. They don't respond to ego. They respond to sincerity, patience, and consistency. And whether Brian has made mistakes or not, these new videos show something very different from the earlier days. He's calmer. He's humbler. He's more grounded. And he's not rushing. And because of that, we got something the internet has never seen before. A moment that took viewers by surprise. One that made people rethink their entire opinion of him. But hold on, because the biggest moment, the one that truly showed the Whittakers in a way nobody expected, didn't come until later. And that moment changed everything. It changed the tone, the energy, and the direction of this entire conversation. And trust me, it's something we need to talk about carefully. Because for the first time in a long time, the Whittakers weren't the ones causing the shock. Brian was. Before we get into the biggest moment, the one that has everyone talking, we need to break down how the tone shifted so dramatically. Because something happened during Brian's latest visit that not only changed viewers' opinions, but honestly changed the entire vibe of the Whittaker story. For months now, people have watched this family through the lens of chaos. Every creator who came around seemed to bring tension, conflict, or their own personal drama. Every update felt like a new problem, a new argument, a new accusation, or a new court-related rumor. And during all that noise, the actual family, the people at the center of the story, were getting drowned out. But Brian's new interaction turned everything upside down. Let's walk through exactly how it unfolded. During one of the calmer moments of his recent footage, Brian was standing near the porch while Betty was talking to him. And instead of rushing her or pushing the conversation, he actually let her take her time. He didn't cut her off. He didn't redirect her. He let her speak at her own pace. And that patience alone changed the entire feel of the moment. Then Ray Ray stepped outside. And this is where things took a surprising turn. Ray Ray has always been guarded. He has moments where he's lighthearted, yes, but he's also extremely sensitive to energy. He knows when someone is uncomfortable around him, or when someone is using him for content, or when something is off. And usually, when new people film him, his body language shifts. Shoulders tense, eyes dart. He steps back, or he goes quiet. But this time, he didn't step back. He didn't freeze. He didn't walk off. He did the opposite. He moved closer, not in a rushed way, not in a confused way, but in a calm, natural, grounded way. And when Brian spoke to him, gently, without pressure, Ray responded. Not with fear, not with discomfort, just a simple, calm acknowledgement. And what really caught people off guard was the look on Brian's face. Usually, he's defensive, intense, or ready to clap back at critics. But in that moment, he softened. You could literally see the tension drop from his shoulders. He wasn't thinking about YouTube. He wasn't thinking about comments or accusations or the people calling him greedy. He wasn't thinking about showing off. He was just present. And that one shift set the stage for the biggest moment of all, Timmy's appearance. Now, before we get into what happened, remember this. Timmy is sensitive to disruption. He knows when something is wrong even if he can't fully express it. When he feels instability, he reacts. When he feels calm, he mirrors it. And for weeks now, with everything going on, APS, removal, creator drama, you could see the emotional weight on him. But the moment he walked into the frame with Brian, everything changed. Timmy wasn't stressed. He wasn't confused. He wasn't overwhelmed. He lit up. It wasn't just a smile. It wasn't just a laugh. It was that signature Timmy energy, the joyful spark everyone recognizes immediately. And when Brian greeted him, Timmy didn't shy away. He didn't walk off. Instead, he moved closer, almost like he was relieved to see someone familiar. He stood right beside Brian, and they started interacting in a way that felt shockingly natural. And then came a part that stunned everyone. Timmy looked directly at the camera, something he rarely does unless he feels completely safe, and he waved. That wave, simple as it was, hit people in a way nobody expected, because it didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like a performance. It didn't feel like a creator trying to squeeze a reaction out of him. It felt like connection, a moment of genuine connection. And the comment sections lit up immediately. This is the happiest I've seen Timmy in months. He actually looks comfortable with Brian. Say what you want, but the family trusts him. Brian might be rough around the edges, but they respond to him. They clearly know him better than we thought. And that's where things got complicated, because viewers started asking one big question. Why does the family respond so differently to Brian compared to others? And this is where the deeper conversation begins. Part of it is familiarity. Brian didn't show up out of nowhere. He grew up in that area. He knows the region. He knows the surroundings. He knows the people. He knows the culture. And the Whittakers pick up on that. They feel when someone is local. They feel when someone isn't judging them. They feel when someone's energy matches theirs. But another part of it, a part that I don't think even Brian expected, is something people are only starting to notice. He doesn't overwhelm them. Some creators come in loud. Some come in with big energy. Some come in with a mission. Some come in with an agenda. Brian doesn't come in with any of that. He rambles, yes. He has his messy moments, absolutely. But when he's with the Whittakers, he tones down without even realizing it. And they respond to that softness. The biggest shock came later when Brian filmed a quieter moment with Betty. She was sitting, talking slowly, explaining something in her own way, and Brian didn't rush her, didn't interrupt her, didn't try to steer the conversation. He let her speak. He let her finish her thought. And then he listened. The internet is so used to seeing people talk at the Whittakers that seeing someone actually talk with them felt strange, almost new. And that's what brings us into the final, most unexpected because there was one scene, the one people keep replaying and sharing, where Ray, Timmy, and Betty were all in the same frame together. All three of them, calm, present, collected. And Brian was standing right there, not dominating the moment, not controlling it, just being there. And for the first time, viewers saw something they haven't seen in months. The Whittakers looked like a family again. Not a family surrounded by drama. Not a family stuck in a legal battle. Not a family being analyzed online. Not a family being picked apart by strangers. A family, a real one. And regardless of how people feel about Brian, even his harshest critics had to admit, he captured something nobody else has in a very long time. Not shock value, not sensationalism, not exploitation. He captured peace, even if it was just for a moment. And that moment, that rare glimpse of calm, is what shifted the conversation. People aren't asking whether Brian is perfect. People aren't asking whether he made mistakes. People aren't asking whether he should be filming the family at all. Right now, people are asking something entirely different. Did Brian accidentally become the only creator who truly sees the family for who they are? It's a question nobody expected to ask. But after seeing these moments, quiet smiles, soft interactions, genuine connection, it's a question a lot of people are starting to think about in a new way. And in part 3, we're going even deeper into the biggest, most unexpected moment that has everyone talking. The one that completely changed how people view Brian's role in this story from this point forward. Because trust me, you're not ready for what happened next. Comment below, what do you think? All right, let's get into this, because what happened next wasn't dramatic, it wasn't chaotic, and it wasn't anything people expected. It was actually one of the calmer turns in this entire situation, but it held more meaning than any loud update ever could. And I think a lot of folks missed it because they were too busy listening to the noise. What we're talking about today is the shift inside the Whittaker family itself. Small steps, quiet changes, things you'd only notice if you weren't distracted by the chaos surrounding them. People tend to look for explosions, big moments, scandals, shouting. But sometimes the biggest updates are the quieter ones, the ones that don't scream for attention. And this one is exactly that. The first thing that happened was something simple. Communication opened up between people who had been avoiding each other for weeks. Not because they suddenly agreed on everything, not because old tension magically disappeared, but because they realized this situation wasn't going away. The Whittakers have never been a confrontational family. They don't speak in long speeches or grand statements. They never have. Their communication comes in nods, short sentences, and understanding built over a lifetime of being together. So when Larry sat down, arms crossed, eyes lowered, and listened for more than 5 minutes without getting up, people who know the family understood what a big step that was. He doesn't sit for long discussion. He doesn't like extended emotional talks. But this time, something different was happening. He was actually taking in the concerns being brought up around him. And that says more than words ever could. Meanwhile, Betty was working through her own worries. She had been pulled in every direction: calls, messages, questions, accusations, support, criticism, all of it at the same time. For someone who doesn't thrive on constant outside attention, it was exhausting. But through that exhaustion, she still made time to check in on the ones who mattered to her most. She didn't do it loudly. She didn't announce it. She didn't hint at it online. She did it quietly, the same way she's always done, by showing up, by calling, by making sure everyone was okay. And then there's the part where Brian reappeared. Now, whether people like him or not, whether they trust him or side-eye, every move he makes, there's one thing everyone noticed: he approached much softer than before. No big entrance. No dramatic headline. No inflated promises. He knew eyes were on him, and he also knew the criticism he had received wasn't going away. What mattered, though, was how he responded to it. Instead of snapping back, instead of making excuses, he did something extremely rare for online personalities. He toned it down. He actually showed restraint. Now, does that erase the questions people still have about him? No. Does it erase the frustration some feel about how he handled things earlier? Of course not. But it does show something important. He recognized the situation wasn't about him. At least, not in this moment. And that shift alone changed the tone of the conversation for everyone else involved. One of the most surprising developments, though, came from the community surrounding them. People who have been on opposite sides of this entire conflict. Eric supporters, Brian supporters, neutral watchers, family defenders, critics, began commenting in ways that suggested they were tired of the fighting, tired of the back and forth, tired of seeing outsiders pulling the family apart more than helping them. When a community shifts its attention from drama to actual concern, that's a major change. You saw people saying, "Forget the YouTubers. How is the family actually doing?" You saw people asking about the basics: food, heat, health, support. You saw fewer accusations and more actual questions. And for the first time in weeks, you saw the focus returning to the Whittakers themselves. Now, let's talk about Ray, because he tends to get overlooked in these updates. He doesn't speak much, but he expresses plenty through his behavior. Over the last few days, people close to the family noticed he had been calmer, more relaxed in his movements, more settled. When someone checked in with him, he didn't withdraw like he sometimes does when there's too much outside pressure. Instead, he stayed close. He watched, he listened, and he didn't seem distressed. For a family like the Whittakers, emotional rhythms are everything. They don't communicate like the internet does. They communicate through energy, tone, routine, familiarity. And Ray being calm, that's a good sign. Timmy, on the other hand, had a moment that stood out to those around him. Something small, but meaningful. Someone handed him something simple, a snack he likes, nothing special. But instead of grabbing it and walking off immediately, he paused, made eye contact, and muttered a genuine thank you. Now again, to outsiders, this is minor. To people who know him, that's a big interaction. It means he felt safe, felt steady, felt comfortable enough to stay grounded instead of rushing away. We are watching a family that communicates in subtle gestures. These moments matter more than dramatic public statements. Then there was Lorraine, who has been navigating everything in her quiet, steady way. She's observant. She picks up on everything around her. And in the last few days, she had been responding with more ease than she had earlier. Not anxious, not tense, just present. And that says a lot. It means she's not absorbing chaos from the outside world. It means the adults around her have kept the environment consistent and stable. And that's exactly what she needs. Even the neighbors noticed the shift. One neighbor mentioned that the usual patterns around the home were returning. Normal noises, normal routines, normal footsteps. And routine is incredibly important for this family. It creates stability. It creates comfort. And it helps drown out the noise from everything online. Now, let's circle back to the part of the update most people missed. Someone close to the situation mentioned that a meeting, informal, not official, took place between two people who had avoided each other for weeks. It wasn't a confrontation. It wasn't a fight. It was a conversation. Short, direct, but much needed. They addressed specific misunderstandings, not the entire mountain of issues, but enough to soften the tension going forward. That small exchange changed the entire tone of their interactions afterward. And because of that, The family wasn't stuck in the middle of the same emotional tug of war. Sometimes the most important progress happens off camera. And that brings us to what might be the quietest, yet biggest shift of all. People close to the situation said the family felt less overwhelmed this week than the week before. Not because everything was fixed, not because the outside noise stopped, but because the core people around them finally realized the Whittakers don't need people fighting for them. They need people supporting them with respect. And that small but powerful shift changed everything. They had more peace this week. They had more normalcy this week. They had more stability this week. And at the end of the day, that's the kind of update that reflects real progress. No shouting, no finger pointing, just genuine steps toward calm. And maybe, just maybe, that was the update everyone overlooked. What do you make of this quieter shift? Do you think this change will continue, or will the outside drama spark up again? Share your thoughts below. By the time everything settled this week, it became clear that the real story wasn't about chaos, conflict, or dramatic confrontations the way people online kept painting it. In fact, when you step back from the noise, it becomes obvious that the most meaningful shift happening within the Whittaker family right now is something a lot quieter and far more important. The past month has been filled with misunderstandings, outside interference, and endless speculation. People argued, creators clashed, and supporters chose sides. Through all of that, the family was stuck in the middle, listening to the sound of their own lives being interpreted by people who weren't actually living them. But something new happened this week. Something small but powerful. People finally started slowing down long enough to notice the things that actually matter. The biggest development wasn't a confrontation, a confession, or a sudden revelation. It wasn't a viral clip or a dramatic statement. Instead, it was a subtle shift in how the family situation was handled by the people closest to them, by those who genuinely care, and even by some of the creators who had been tangled in conflict. For the first time in weeks, the Whittakers were given space. Not space in the sense of being forgotten or ignored, but space in the sense of being protected. Their home became a little quieter. Their days became a little more predictable. The stream of strangers slowed down. The constant parade of cameras and voices faded into something manageable. And when you talk to people who were actually near the family this week, people who visited them, checked in, or simply drove by, the description they give isn't fear or tension. It's calm. Not perfect calm, not absolute peace, but a kind of balance that had been missing for a long time. There were fewer interruptions, fewer cars pulling in, fewer overwhelming moments, and that gave the family time to reset. It gave them a chance to breathe, to settle back into their routines, and to reconnect with each other in a way that wasn't influenced by outsiders. If you understand the Whittakers, really understand them, you know that stability means everything. Their communication style is subtle. Their routines are familiar. Their comfort comes from predictability and connection. So when their environment becomes chaotic, it affects them deeply. When it becomes calm, even temporarily, it allows them to function the way they're meant to. That is the essence of the update most people completely missed. While the internet was debating who said what, who filmed what, and who was telling the truth, the family quietly regained a little control over their daily lives. That's not something that shows up in a headline, but it's something that shows up in their faces, their voices, and their behavior. People close to them described more small smiles for Betty, more normal conversations between family members, more moments where their energy felt grounded instead of tense. Those are the signs that matter. Now, was everything perfect? Absolutely not. There are still concerns. There are still questions. There are still people arguing online. But the point is this. For once, the family wasn't at the center of the argument. People were arguing about them, but not with them, not in their face, and not inside their home. And that difference matters more than most people realize. One of the most interesting shifts this week happened among the creators themselves. Some of the tension between them started to cool. People who had been pointing fingers at one another began to back off, not because they suddenly agreed with each other, but because they realized the arguing was doing nothing for the family. In fact, several people reached out to each other privately, not to team up, not to gossip, but to clarify, apologize, or simply clear the air. That alone changed the tone of the whole situation. When the people talking about the Whittakers start actually listening instead of reacting, the family benefits. And this week, that happened more than most people noticed. As for Brian, his presence throughout this entire situation has shifted in a noticeable way. Earlier in this saga, he approached everything with a kind of bold confidence. He filmed often. He talked frequently. He defended himself loudly. He jumped into the spotlight quickly, and at times, too quickly. But over the past several days, his tone became more muted. His words were more measured. He didn't push himself into the story the way he did before. Whether you like him, dislike him, or still feel uncertain about him, the truth is that he seems to understand now that the family isn't something to push himself into. There's something to approach carefully. That doesn't erase concerns. It doesn't change what happened, but it does show growth, or at least a different level of awareness. Even people who were critical of him admitted that he seemed more thoughtful recently, less reactive, less defensive, more focused on trying to find his place rather than force one. That shift contributed to the calmer environment around the family, whether intentionally or not. But perhaps the most important part of this update comes from the people living in Odd, West Virginia, the community itself. Locals who have watched all of this unfold from just down the road have started stepping up in subtle ways. Not by filming, not by posting, not by stirring things up, but by quietly looking out for the family. Some checked in. Some drove by just to make sure everything was okay. Some made sure no strangers were causing problems. No one made a big deal out of it. No one bragged online. They just did what good neighbors do. And that, more than anything else, is what the family needed. Because for all the online attention, the real support has always come from the people physically close to them. People who know the land, the roads, the rhythm of life in that area. People who don't see the Whittakers as a curiosity or content, but as human beings who deserve respect. There were other subtle improvements, too. The house felt more stable. They were sticking to routines more consistently. There were fewer moments of confusion or overwhelm. Even small things, like meals being on time, conversations being calmer, and daily tasks being completed, made a difference. And while none of these things are dramatic enough to make headlines, they're the foundation that determines whether the family thrives or struggles. That's why, if you're paying close attention, this was one of the best weeks the Whittakers have had in a long time. Not because someone swooped in to save them. Not because a creator fixed everything. Not because a big organization intervened. But because, for once, the noise around them faded just enough for their natural routine to return. That's what people missed. They were looking for a dramatic twist, a big reveal, a shocking update. Instead, the real update was something much more meaningful. The family is stabilizing. They're adjusting. They're recovering from the chaos. They're finding a new balance. And the people closest to them, whether family, friends, neighbors, or more careful creators, are letting that happen instead of disrupting it. When you understand how deeply the Whittakers rely on consistency, you realize that this shift isn't small at all. It's crucial. It means the foundation is being rebuilt. It means the emotional pressure on the family is lighter. It means they are being given a chance to simply exist without an audience demanding explanations or entertainment. And if this continues, if the calm becomes more permanent, they will be better off for it. The real story here is not about controversy. It's about recovery. It's about a family who has been pushed and pulled by outsiders, gaining back a small piece of control over their lives. So as this chapter closes, the message is simple. The Whittakers had a better week. A much better week. Not because of drama, but because of peace. Not because someone forced it, but because the noise finally slowed down. Not because the world stopped watching, but because the people around them started acting with more care. And sometimes, that's all a family needs to begin moving forward again. Comment below. Do you think this calm will last? Or do you expect more twists ahead? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.